But today's daf in Masechet Shavuot is 25. Chaf Hey, we're halfway. Halfway. Does it feel like halfway? It's more than halfway. No, it's not. Start a bet. Says the Mishnah, and we're continuing our discussion about a person's shvuah. Remember, the halachot of shvuah are very complex, which is why we hold a whole Masechta about them. And the basic idea is that if you make a shvuah that you're going to do something or not do something, and you violate your shvuah, if you do it on purpose, there's certain punishments. And if you do it by mistake, which is what we've been discussing till now, really, you bring a karban olevi yored, right? So if you say, I swear I'm going to, I don't know, go to the store tomorrow, and you don't go to the store, and you do it because you forgot your shvuah, then you bring a karban. If you do it on purpose, then there's a different punishment. You either get what we talked about a little bit, but you might get a chiyuv that's stronger than that. So that's the basic concept. Of course, it's very oversimplified, but it's important for our Mishnah. So it says the Gemara now. Good morning, Charlie. We're up to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Hey Amud Aleph. Echad dvarim shel atzmo. Now you can make a shvuah about personal things, meaning you can say, I will do something, or I won't do something, or I did something, right? Future and past. But you can also make a shvuah dvarim shel achirim. You can also say about other people. You can say, I swear that Ruvain didn't come to shul yesterday, right? Or Ruvain did come to shul yesterday, right? Now, of course, it's a little bit hard to say, I swear that Ruvain will come to shul tomorrow, right? Because you don't control another person. So a shvuah about somebody else is not in the future, but it could be in the past. And that's going to be, of course, very relevant. Echad says, continues the Mishnah, Echad dvarim sheyesh behem mamash. A shvuah can be about something that is tangible. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. Tangible means something that I can quantify and measure and hold, like I will eat a piece of meat. That's tangible. But echad dvarim she'ein behem mamash, but it can be something that's not substantial. Now, substantial can mean two things. One example of insubstantial, which we had yesterday, is ketzad. A person can say, now these are all the, well, I'm going to give it away, even though the Mishnah is about to tell you. You can have insubstantial where you talk about something that's intangible, like sleep, right? A shvuah that I will sleep or I won't sleep. You can't hold on to sleep, right? You can't touch sleep, right? But the other inconsequential shvuah is that you could have a shvuah about something that's essentially meaningless. Like, I swear that, what's something meaningless? I swear that I will throw a stone into the river. That's the great example of meaningless in our Mishnah, meaning there's no consequence, no one cares, no one wants it or doesn't want it, but it obviously is a tangible thing in some ways. So let's read all those cases in the Mishnah. We're up to the third line of the Mishnah, which is like the 10th line down. Ketzad. What are all these cases of shvuah? Amar shvuah shetein leish ploni v'shelo etein. I can make a shvuah about myself. I will give money to Ploni, I will not give money to Ploni. Shenatati, I gave money. Shalonatati, I didn't give money. Those are all about me, right? Now I can also make shvuot about intangibles about me. For example, she'ishan, shelo ishan, that I will sleep or I will not sleep. That's the future. Or she'yashanti, v'shelo yashanti, I did sleep or I didn't sleep. I swear I didn't sleep yesterday, right? And that could be true or false. Or, now these are other inconsequential shavuot, another type of it. I swear that I will throw rocks into the sea, which is meaningless. No one cares, right? It's like adding sand to the seashore, as they say, right? It's not, you're not changing anything, you're not doing anything, but it is an act, right? It is something you can say yes or no. Or shelo ezrok, that I will not throw stones into the sea. Or shezarakti, v'shelo zarakti, or I did or did not do. So these are all shavuot about a person himself or herself. What this doesn't include yet is shavuot about somebody else, right? We said in the beginning of the Mishnah that you can swear about somebody else that they did or did not or did sleep or did not or did throw a stone into the sea, but you can't make that shvuah for the future because you can't swear that someone will do something if you don't control that person. So we'll discuss that. Now, that is the first part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael, who we've quoted way back in the beginning of the Masechta and many times since, Rabbi Yishmael says, I disagree. Eino chayav ela ala ati lavo. The only type of shvuah that you're chayav for, meaning chayav, if you do it and you violate your shvuah by mistake and you have to bring a karban olevi yored, that's only true about a future shvuah. If you say in the future, I will go to the store. If you don't, you bring a karban if you forgot. But at the past, shenemar, it's based on the pasuk that says, Lahara ol heitiv. Can you go turn on? If it says in the pasuk, a person who swears to do bad or to do good, which is the future, right? So, but not the past. You don't bring a karban for a shvuah of the past. Amarlo Rabbi Akiva, said Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Yishmael, in Cain, in the old farm, sheish b'hem hara v'hatava. If you're reading the pasuk literally, then it should be limited to things that are good or bad, right? Things that are objective. I'm going to harm myself or do good for myself. But what about neutral things or things that don't really have good or bad or things that are just reporting, right? I swear that I saw, or we'll go to the baseball game, or that's like, it's pretty neutral, or that I saw someone do something. So how do you include other things that do not have hara'ah hatava? Dvarim she'em ben harav hatava minayin. So he asked that to Rabbi Yishmael. Amar lo, so Rabbi Yishmael said to him, well, riboy hakatuv. The pasuk includes more things because the pasuk continues. Rashi quotes it here and says, maybe Rashi doesn't quote it here. He does. It says the chol asher yivate adam dissotav. Anything you express. So it says the hara leitiv. It says anything that is marbe, other things that are not good and bad. Amar lo, so Rabbi Akiva said back to Rabbi Yishmael, im riba katuv lekach, riba katuv lekach. Well, if you're including more things than just good and bad, you can also include more things than just the future, and you can include also the past. So that is a set machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Says the Gemara now, to unpack this Mishnah. Love that word that I learned. Tanura Banan. The Braita, this is a Tosefta we had in the beginning of Masechet Nidarim, which of course compares the concept of Nidarim to Shevuot. Says the Tosefta, Chomer b'Nidarim b'Shvuot. There are stringencies or uniquenesses that are stronger by Nidarim, where remember the basic difference in a Neder and a Shvuah is that in a shvuah, you talk about something you will or will not do or did not do. It's about you. By a neder, you talk about the object, right? You say, this object is prohibited to me. So it could be the same implication. You say, I will not eat meat, right? Or you could say, meat is prohibited to me, right? So they could have the same exact meaning, but there's different emphasis in them. And of course, there's differences because of that. So what are some of the differences? Says the Braita, Chomer b'Nidarim b'Shvuot and Chomer b'Shvuot b'Nidarim. Each one has its own uniquenesses and stringencies. What are they? Chomer b'Nidarim. What is more chamor about Nidarim? Shenidarim chalim al dvar mitzvah, dvar reshut. That a neder can be chal on dvar mitzvah like a dvar reshut. Meaning, if you say, a sukkah, for example, is prohibited to me, I will not use this sukkah, right? Or no, this sukkah is prohibited to me, then even though it's a dvar mitzvah, the neder is chal. We discussed this in Nidarim a lot. Masha'enkim b'Shvuot. But as we had the last few days, in Shevuot, you can't get up there and say a Shvuah, I make a Shvuah that I will not sit in a sukkah, right? Because you can't overcome what the Torah has told you to do. So that's a chomra of Nidarim over Shavuot. Chomer, and of course it reflects the fact that the responsibility to sit in a sukkah is not on the sukkah, it's on the person, right? So you can't say, I no longer will sit in the sukkah, but you can say this sukkah is prohibited to me. But anyways, that's a discussion in Nidarim. Chomer b'Shvuot. What is more stringent about Shavuot? Shashvuot chalot al davar she'ein bo mamash. You can make a shvuah about an object or a thing that doesn't have a tangible existence, like sleep. You can say, I won't sleep, right? Because it's the I who won't sleep. But you can't make a neder, sleep is prohibited to me, right? Masha'en kein, davar she'ish bo mamash, masha'en kein b'Nidarim. Okay, that's just sort of a foundational braita that the Gemara felt you should really know as you embark on this sugya. It's not really related so much to our Mishnah. Of course, it elaborates on some of the details. But getting back to our Mishnah now, Ketzad, what's an example of a Shevuah? Amar Shevuah she'atein leploni v'shelo atein. I will give someone money or I won't give someone money. Now, who are you giving money to? Am I atein? Who are you giving money to, right? You're talking about giving money, right? They're coming to you, they're raising money for a poor family, and you say, I swear I will give money, or I swear I won't give money, then mushpav omein mahar sinayu. When you swear I will give money to charity, that's not, you already have a tzivoy to give tzedakah. What are you adding to that? Shenemar naton titain lo, right? You've got to give money to a poor person if you have it. Ella says, well, you're right. It's talking about matana la'ashir. You can't be referring to where you swore that you're going to give tzedakah. You swore you're going to give a gift, right? You found the billionaire who really wants another $100, and you swear you're going to give it to him, right? A matana la'ashir. So there you can give whatever you want or not give, and therefore you can make a shvuah. Okay, says the Gemara now, the first wide line. The next case in the Mishnah was you swear she'ishan b'shelo ishan. I will sleep or I will not sleep. right? The Mishnah said that's a good shvuah. Ask the Gemara. Charlie asked this question, I think, on Motzei Shabbat. Eini, can you make such a shvuah? Rabbi Yochanan, didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Ha'omer shvuah shlo ishan shlosha yamim? If a person says, I swear I will not sleep for the next 3 days, right? Because I got really bad finals, I'm gonna procrastinate like everyone does, but the next 3 days I'm not gonna sleep and I'm gonna do my work. Says Rabbi Yochanan, malkinoto, you give him lashes because that's called a shvuat shav. It's basically an impossible shvuah. The yashan altar, and you could go to sleep right away. Now, why can you go to sleep right away? It implies that you can't swear about sleep, right? It says, well, that's not why. Hatam d'amr shlosha, right? The reason you can sleep right away is because your shvuah is meaningless because it's impossible, because you can't stay awake for 3 days. But hachad lo amr shlosha, you say I won't sleep for 1 day or 10 hours, or I won't take a nap Shabbat afternoon. That is possible, and therefore that shvuah would be chal. Okay, then we said the third wide line now. You make a shvuah that you will throw a stone into the sea or not. Again, a meaningless kind of thing. It's not really significant, but it is something you can do. And the shvuah is chal. And if you violate that shvuah, if you do it by mistake, you bring a karban. If you do it on purpose, you get punished, right? So that would be a chal, a reliable shvuah. Itmar. Says the Gemara, what about another person? And this gets into a very, very nuanced and important discussion. Let's say shvuah shezarak ploni tzor liyam, or shelo zarak. I get up and I say, I swear that Ruvain threw a stone into the sea. I was in the beach yesterday and I saw him do it. Or I swear that I was there all day and I didn't, and I saw him not do it. So you're trying to establish a fact about somebody else in the past, right? Now, Rav Amar Chayav. Rav says, okay, that's a fine shvuah, right? You made a shvuah, you made a statement. If you're lying, you get punished. If you're telling the truth, great. But you're chayav if you're not telling the truth. And Shmuel says, patur. Shmuel says that is not a valid shvuah. Why not? So Rav Amar Chayav, because Rav says, look, the only criteria for making a shvuah is you have to be able to say the positive of the act and the negative of the act. Ita bilav vehin. You need to say, he threw a stone, he didn't throw a stone. Remember, we had yesterday a discussion about mitzvot, right? Where you can say, I will sit in a sukkah, but you can't make a shvuah that I will not sit in a sukkah because you're not allowed to do that. You can't say, I swear I will not hear the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, let's say, right? Or sit in the sukkah is better. You can't say that, and therefore the shvuah is not chal on the yes because you can't do the no, right? Because you're not allowed to make a shvuah against the Torah. But this case, says Rav, you can say a shvuah that he did do it or didn't do it. So it's ita bila vehin. La vehin means yes and no, right? And the Torah said lahara lehetev, which is the positive and the negative. So that's Rav's opinion. Now Shmuel says you're patur. Shmuel says you're a patur. Why? Because leta bilahaba. The Shmuel says you need more than just yes and no for a shvuah to be effective. You need to have past and future. So if you can say, let's say again about eating, you can say, I ate or didn't eat, I will eat or I won't eat. That is the criteria you need for a shvuah. And Rav says you don't need all 4 of that. You need 2 of those. You need yes or no. And it could be the past or the future, right? But according to Shmuel, you need to have both. And since when you talk about another human being, I could say, I saw Reuven throw a stone or not throw a stone, but I can't say, I know Reuven will throw a stone or won't throw a stone, because it's not, no one would listen to your shvuah. How do you know that? You don't control Reuven, right? How could you control whether he does or doesn't? And so therefore you can't make a shvuah about another person for the future. According to Shmuel, because you can't make a shvuah about another person for the future, you also can't make it about that person for the past. So that is Shmuel's chiddush. Rav disagrees, and it seems like we pass like Rav. But anyways, that is the machloket, very fundamental machloket of Rav and Shmuel. Says the Gemara, it seems that there might be earlier Tanaic sources for this machloket. Maybe they're arguing similar to the machloket in our Mishnah of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva about whether you're chayav on a shvuah only, remember Rabbi Shimon said only in the future, and Rabbi Akiva said the future and the past. It's not. Now let's read our Mishnah. We're quoting our Mishnah now. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Rabbi Shmuel says in our Mishnah, Eino chayav ala atid lavo. You are only chayav if you make a shvuah about the future, not about the past. Shenemar lahara or lehetev, which is in the future tense, to do good or to do bad or to do good. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, so Rabbi Akiva responded to him in the Mishnah in Cain, if you're limiting it based on the pasuk, ainli ela dvarim sheish ben harav hatava. I only know about things in which there is a tangible good or bad. Dvarim she'ein ben harav hatava minayin, things that are neutral, that don't necessarily good for someone or bad for someone. How do you know you're also chayav? Amar lo, Rabbi Shmuel answered in our Mishnah, miboya katuf, because the pasuk has more words which say the chol asher yivata ha'adam b'sfatav, right? Anything you say. Amar lo, Rabbi Akiva replied to him and said, "Im kain riba katuv lekach." Im riba katuv lekach, riba katuv lekach. Just like the Torah added for one, it added for the other. So it seems to me, now says the Gemara, that Rabbi Yishmael is reading the pasuk to be very literal. It's limited basically to what it says in the pasuk, which is hara ulehetev, which sounds like the future. And Rav Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rav seems to be going when Rav said that you can be chayav for something that does not apply in the future, it only applies in the past, is like Rabbi Akiva, that you don't need very broad criteria for your shvuah. So even a shvuah that's in the past will be chayav, right? It's not just the future like the Torah said. And Shmuel says like Rabbi Yishmael. Shmuel is going like Rabbi Yishmael, who says only a future shvuah can be chal, and therefore a shvuah that can be chal only in the past and not the future would not be chal. Says the Gemara, well, that's not really necessarily the case because you're mixing your machlokas here. You're mixing your metaphors. Because aliba de Rabbi Yishmael, remember, Rabbi Yishmael's opinion is that you can only be chayav on a shvuah for the future. In which case, you can never be chayav on a shvuah for somebody else. Because somebody else's actions, you can only talk about in the past. According to Rabbi Yishmael, there is no chayav in the past. So aliba de Rabbi Yishmael, kuli amalo pligi, that you can't be chayav for a shvuah about somebody else, right? Because hashta, milta de'ita bil haba, and a thing which does exist in the future, such as saying, I will do something, but he says, lo mechayev ale Rabbi Yishmael l'shavar. Rabbi Yishmael says, if you talk about it in the past tense, you're not chayev. So certainly a discussion about somebody else, which is milta deleta bil haba, where you can't talk about what they will do in the future because you don't control them. Me boy, you don't need to tell me that you're putter for saying a shvuah about them in the past. Ki pligi, when do they argue? When is the machloket of Rav and Shmuel? Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. They're arguing according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that you can be mechayev on a shvuah in the past, right? Do we say, Rav seems like Rabbi Akiva, right? That, okay, if I say about somebody else, I saw him throw stones into the sea yesterday, that's a regular shvuah about the past, and you'd be chayev, like Rabbi Akiva says. But Shmuel would say to you, Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi mechayev Rabbi Akiva hatam l'sha'avar. Rabbi Akiva only says you're chayev in the past if it's something that could also be in the future, right? Ela milta de'ita bil haba, something that could be in the future, which again is something about me, because I control my future, right? You control your destiny. So mechayev Rabbi Akiva l'sha'avar. Then since I could do it in the future, I could say, I will not sleep today. I swear I will not eat, let's say eat. I swear I will not drink coffee today. So therefore I can make a shvuah about the past. I swear I did not drink coffee yesterday, or I did, right? But it could be, says Shmuel, that something that does not exist in the future, meaning it's about somebody else and I can't control the future, Rabbi Akiva would not be mechayev you in the past. And so the machloket Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael is limited to how you darshan the pasuk, but does not necessarily relate to this machloket of Rav and Shmuel about making a shvuah in the past about somebody else, which you couldn't do in the future. That's more okay. What about a next case? Lema the plutka the Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira of Rabbanan. We turn the page. Maybe the machloket of Rav and Shmuel is connected to the machloket of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira and the Rabbanan, which we're about to have in the Mishnah coming up in a couple pages, right? 2 days. So what is this machloket? It's not. There's a Mishnah later on that, again, in 2 days, we're going to have this Mishnah, which says the following: Nishba levatel ta mitzvah. Person swears and says, I am not going to do a certain mitzvah. I'm not going to sit in the sukkah tomorrow, okay? Or at all, let's say. Or I'm not going to eat matzah on Pesach, whatever the mitzvah is. You swear you're not going to do, you're going to be mevatel. You're going to undo or not do, ignore a mitzvah. And says the Mishnah, lo bitel, you didn't listen to your shvuah. You ate matzah, right? So you went against your shvuah. Patur, you're not chayav for being over your shvuah because your shvuah is meaningless because you can't make a shvuah that you're not going to eat matzah. So your shvuah had no meaning. Going against your shvuah had no meaning, and everyone's happy. But if you make a shvuah l'kayemet mitzvah, let's say you do the opposite. You say, I swear I'm going to go to minyan every day, okay? Or I swear I'm going to eat matzah this Pesach. And you don't do it. You sleep. You fall asleep and you don't do it. Look, says the Mishnah later, patur, you're also patur. You made a shvua, I'm going to go to shul, and you didn't go, but you can't make a shvua. Shahaya bidin shehei chayav, because you would have thought that you'd be chayav k'divrei Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, because Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says you are chayav for making a shvua in the positive, saying, I swear I will eat matzah, right? Which is, of course, something that you have to do, first of all. But second of all, you can't swear the opposite. You can't say, I swear I will not eat matzah, because you can't go against the Torah. So it only exists in the hain and not in the lav, in the future, right? Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera said, Ma'im harashut, right? Something that you want to do or don't want to do. You want to eat a hamburger or not. Right? If you swear and say, I will eat a hamburger today, and you don't, even though the Torah doesn't care if you eat a hamburger, Har Sinai doesn't care, you're chayav for making that shvua. So therefore, something which the Torah does care, like eating matzah, right? Mitzvah, a commandment, shemushba le Har Sinai, eno din shehei chayav aleh. If you make a shvua, you for sure should be chayav. The same way you can be mechayav yourself for something that's not required, you can be mechayav yourself even more so for something that is required. So that's Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, that if you make a shvua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera's opinion, that if you make a shvua about a mitzvah and you violate it, you're chayav for being over that shvua. Amrulo, now they said to him, this means the Tanakama and the Chachamim, that's not the case. Because loim amr b'shvuat harishut, it's only the case that you're chayav for shvuat harishut, shekain asab lav kahin. Because there you could say the negative like the positive. You can say, I will eat a hamburger, or I won't eat a hamburger. You control yourself. Tomar b'shvuat mitzvah, shekain lo asab lav kahin. Can't say the same thing by shvuat mitzvah, where you can't say the negative. You can't swear, I won't do a mitzvah. And therefore, when you swear that you will do a mitzvah, it has no impact. Okay, so now, pause for a second. This is a Mishnah in 2 days, where Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera expresses an opinion that says that a shvuah does not need to have positive and negative, right? As long as the positive, or what you're saying, is possible, meaning I swear I will sit in the sukkah, which is definitely possible. If I violate that, I'm over my shvuah. Comes along the Chachamim and say, no. A shvuah has to exist in both yes and no. So says the Gemara now, on the surface, this seems to be similar to the machloket of Rav and Shmuel, right? Because Shmuel says you're patur if you make a shvuah about somebody else in the past, because you couldn't make that same shvuah in the future, right? So that seems, now obviously it's not a yes and no issue, it's a past and future issue, but it seems to be limiting a shvuah to very specific circumstances. And that's like Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. And Rav, who says in general, you're chayav, did I get it backwards? I think. And Rav, who said, Shmuel said you're patur. And Rav, who said you're chayav, because even though you can't say it in the future, it exists in the past, that could be like the opinion of the Chachamim, right? Like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, that a shvuah for a mitzvah, even though it doesn't exist in the negative, will be mechayiv in the positive, right? So it's Rav like Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and Shmuel like the Rabbanan. So it says, let's read that inside. Nema, let us say, we are 10 lines down or so. Rav Damak Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, that it doesn't matter that you can't do the flip side, as long as the true thing you said is possible, that you saw someone throw a stone in the sea, or you will do a mitzvah tomorrow, then you're chayav if you're over it. And Shmuel Damak Rabbanan says, where again, it's really not the same machloket, because one is past and future, and one is yes and no. So Aliba the Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says that you can be chayav for a mitzvah, meaning you can say a yes shvuah, you don't need a corresponding no shvuah, kuli amalo pliga, that you don't need, if you don't need a no, you don't need a future, right? Because hashta lav ve'hein lo boy, he doesn't require you to have a yes and no in your shvuah, but so certainly lahabal shavar boy, question mark, right? You definitely don't need a future and a past. That's even less important. And the reason it's less important is that the pasuk expresses it as yes and no. Right, so the pasuk says lav and hain, and if the pasuk is not literal, certainly the future and past is not literal. Ki pliga, when do Rav and Shmuel argue about the future and the past? Aliba de Rabbanan. Shmuel sounds like the Rabbanan. That Shmuel says just like the Rabbanan, that you need to have a yes and no, and you also need to have a future and a past. And Rav says no. Kilo mechayev Rabbanan b'la v'hein. Rabbanan take the yes and no very seriously. Dichtib, because the pasuk says lihara o lehetev behadeh. It says clearly it has to be a shvua for yes or no, for good or bad. And if by a mitzvah where you can make a shvua, I will sit in a sukkah or I will eat matzah, but you can't make a shvua, I will not sit in a sukkah or I will not eat matzah, so you don't have yes and no. How do we even know the future and the past? Well, our Mishnah said it's from the extra words in the pasuk. There, they would still be mechayev. They would say that is a second level sort of requirement that a shvua needs to have yes and no. A shvua does not need to have future and past according to Shmuel, right? Even though the Torah includes it, it doesn't require it in that case. That is the machloket. Okay, so that is how we explain it. It's a beautiful way to expose these two Mishnayot. Says the Gemara, Matav Rav Hamnuna. Ask Rav Hamnuna, I have a question, says Rav Hamnuna. There's a Braita that we're going to have, actually, I think it's a Mishnah also, later on at the end of our parak, where a person says, Lo achalti hayom. I didn't eat today. I make a shvua, well, we'll see. You didn't make your shvua yet. You're about to make a shvua. It says, I didn't eat today. Or, Lo henachti tefillin hayom. Right? I didn't put on tefillin today. And the guy comes to you and your whoever's coming to you says, are you really telling the truth? Mashbiachani, do you swear to me? Right? This is the common language where you make a statement and the person responds to you, do you swear about that statement? Valmar, you say, Amen, I do swear. Says the Mishnah later, you are chayav, right? You are chayav if what you said is not true. I mean, if you swear you didn't eat, but you had a big breakfast, or you swear you didn't wear tefillin, but you spent the whole morning in shul. Right? So then you're chayav because you lied. Now it says Gemara, Bishlama lo achalti. I understand a shvua that I didn't eat. Well, everyone agrees that's a great typical shvua because you could have said I did eat, right? Ita below ochel. Sorry, Lishma, I said I didn't eat. I could have said I did. I said I did eat, a shvua that I did eat, sorry. You could have said I didn't eat, right? So obviously the flip side exists, right? Ita below ochel. Elo henachti, sorry. I made a mistake. You said I didn't eat in the past. You could say I will not eat in the future, right? Meaning you could make a shvua, which is what Shmuel required you, future and the past, right? So you could make a future tense of that shvua. But what about the tefillin? You say I didn't put on tefillin. Avalohi nachti. You can't make a shvua. I will not put on tefillin tomorrow. Mi'ita below aniach. How could you say I will not put on tefillin, right? So how could you be chayiv on such a shvua if you can't do it in the future, right? And so it's a machloket. Basically, it's a question on Shmuel. Shmuel says that you can't be chayiv on a shvua for somebody else in the past because you can't make a shvua for them in the future. How can you be chayiv on a shvua for yourself about a mitzvah in the past if you can't make that shvua for the future? So that was the question that Rav Hamnuna asked on Shmuel. Says more, but he thought of the answer right away. He thought of the question and he thought of an answer for the question, which is that the Mishnah might not be referring to a karban. Shmuel was referring to a karban olev yoreh. You're not chayiv a karban unless the shvua exists in the past and the future. The Mishnah might have been referring to if you did it on purpose. Remember, you do it on purpose, then you don't bring a karban olev yoreh. So litztadin katani. The Mishnah was referring to different aspects, to side details about the prohibition of shvuah. That lo achalti is referring to karban. Lo achalti, which is something that can exist in the future. If you do that and you forget and you make a mistake and you eat, or you made a mistake and you didn't tell the truth, you bring a karban olev yoreh. Lo hinachti, but saying I didn't put on tefillin, if you did that on purpose and they gave you warning and they said, we know you put on tefillin, then the malkut, then you wouldn't necessarily bring a karban, according to Shmuel, because it doesn't exist in the future, but you would be chayav makot for lying, basically, which is what you're chayav for doing it on purpose. Okay. Mativ Rava. So now Rava asks from another Mishnah. Again, these are all these Mishnayot at the end of our parak. Ezuhi shvuat shav. Now the Mishnah later reflects on the fact that there's a difference between a shvuat bitui, which is a shvuat that you express, I will do something, or I won't do something, or shvuat shav, where you make a statement that is nonsensical, right? That is on its face a false statement, but you're taking God's name in vain. What is a shvuat shav? Let's say you're nishpa l'shanot et hayadua la'adam. You swear against a fact that is well known to people. For example, ba'amar al mud shel even shu shel zahav. You say, I swear that that piece of stone is really gold, right? Which is factually wrong, right? Everybody knows what stone is, and everybody knows what gold is. And everyone has walked by this Amud, the Acropolis, every day of their lives, and you swear the Acropolis is made out of gold, right? That's a great example, right? So clearly everyone knows you're telling the fault. You're not saying I was on a trip somewhere and I saw something and it was gold, which wouldn't be a Shevuot bitoy if it's lying. You said something that everybody knows is false. Va'amar Ula. Now Ula says, what does that mean? Everybody knows it's false. It has to be Hushnikar Shlosha B'nei Adam. It has to be known at the time you made your Shevuot to 3 other people. Once 3 people know something, the whole world knows something, right? That's the rule of TikTok, right? Once it's been shared 3 times, it's viral. So the principle has to be known to at least 3 people. Now, it says the Gemara, Taima de Nikar. What this implies is that the only reason you're chayav for Shevuot Shav and not Shevuot Bitoy is because 3 other people or the world knows that what you're saying is false. Halon Nikar over Mishum Shevuot Bitoy, right? If it wasn't well known to the world, you said, I traveled to a exotic place where no one's ever been, and I swear that they had a temple built out of gold. And then the National Geographic gets there and they find out that it's made out of marble. So you were lying, right? Made out of stone. So it would imply that you're chayav. Now, how could you be chayav for making that kind of shvua? You can't make a shvua in the future about that. Amai ha'eno b'yehei shel zahav. How could you say it will be gold in the future? Meaning, I swear that the temple that is built in the Amazon will be made out of gold. You have no control if you're not building it yourself, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's referring to what somebody else did. So according to Shmuel, that a shvua has to not only affect the past, but be possible in the future. How could this have a counterpoint in the future? So that was the question that Rava asked. And again, hu motivla, hu mefarikla, he answered his own question that it could be nikar over mishum shvuat shav, right? If you are recognize it in the past, you're over mishum, meaning if it's known to other people that what you're saying is false, you're chayav from shvuat shav, but lo nikar over mishum shvuat sheker. If it's not known to other people, you're chayav a different shvua, which is called a shvuat sheker. Now we're going to get into some of these nuances later, but a shvuat sheker is basically where you lied, right? And that is not necessary in the future. Meaning you get up and say, I swear that I saw a temple in this place that is made out of gold. We arrive the next day and find out that you're lying. That is a shvuat sheker, and you'd be chayav for shvuat sheker, which we'll again talk about, has different details, but is what the Mishnah is referring to, not necessarily shvuat bitoy to be chayav a karban olevi yored. Amar Abaya. Now says Abaya at the first end of the first wide line, umode Rav. Now even though Rav says, right? Remember, Rav says that a shvuah in the about somebody else, right? Rav said you can be chayav even though you can't make a shvua in the future about somebody else, right? But Rav admits that you're not chayav, but omer l'chavero, if a person says to somebody else, this gets into a very complicated and nuanced detail, which is really important, which is that in addition to the regular shvua of telling the truth or lying, there's a specific added case in the Torah called shvuat edut, right? Where this is very sensitive, right? Because let's say in order for a person to win in a court case, you need to have testimony. We all know this exists, right? And it could be you can't control what other people say, right? So you were in a car accident, you know 5 people saw it happen, and you're begging them, please come and tell what you saw, right? It's very common. And they don't want to do it, or they're being bought off, or whatever. So there is a requirement in the Torah that if a person says to you, can you come and say testimony for me? And the person says, I don't know testimony for you. And it turns out that they're lying, that they bring a special karban olevi yored, for shvuat ha'edut, for refusing to report. It's not refusing to report testimony, it's saying I didn't know testimony, okay? Denying that they knew it. So let's say a person says to their friend, Omer l'chavero, second line, shvuat shani yodea lecha edut. Person says to somebody else, I swear the positive. I know testimony. I saw what happened with your business deal. And Reuven says to Shimon. Shimon says, great. I'm going to call up the court. We're going to bring the judges in. Come tomorrow, and you'll say your testimony. And it turns out, ishtakach de lo yadale. Turns out that he was a phony, that he didn't know anything, right? He showed up the next day and he said, do you remember what happened on Monday? And he said, Monday? I was away on Monday, or I don't know, or he had it all wrong, or, he was basically lying. So he swore that he knew something that it turns out he didn't know, or he swore that he saw something that he didn't see. So that is somebody else's action, essentially in the future, right? Now, Hoel says the Gemara, Rav would admit that since leta bichlal she'eni yodei lecha edut, right? Since you couldn't say the patur, because ho'avaleta bichlal she'ena yodei lecha edut, because since you couldn't have said, I swear I don't know testimony for you, you can't say I do know testimony for you. Now, why couldn't you swear I don't know testimony? Because that is a separate discussion in the Torah of Shevuot Edut. Right? Shevuot Edut is where you go to someone and say, do you know testimony? And they say, I deny, I don't know testimony for you. And it turns out they did. So there's a special requirement that they get punished because they are basically messing with the whole order of judgment by not participating, right? But since you can't do the negative for Shevuot Bitoy, you can't do the positive. So a person who says, I do know testimony will be patur because they can't say, I don't know testimony. Now they can, and they'd be chayav, but it would be a Shevuot ha'idut, not a Shevuot Bitoy. Now let's say, yadati velo yadati, a person goes about the past. I knew or I didn't know testimony. That's the machloket of Rav and Shmuel, right? Because Rav and Shmuel argued about the past. Shmuel says you're never chayav for the past about somebody else, and Rav said you are. If you say ha'aditi velo ha'aditi, machloket. That case also, I did testify or I didn't testify, meaning I saw it happen. That also is the machloket of Rav and Shmuel, because you can't do that in the future. You can't say, I swear that Ruvain will testify, right? So according to Shmuel, you're patur, and according to Rav, you're chayav. Now, the Shmuel, the Amar, we're going to read this all inside. The Shmuel says, the Amar, milta de leta bilahaba, lo mechayiv ala shavar. According to Shmuel, who says that things that you can't say in the future are not mechayiv you in the past, I understand why there's a concept of Shevuot Edut, right? Because if you go to someone and say, do you know testimony for me? He says, I swear I don't know testimony for you, right? And it turns out he does. That should be chayiv just like a Shevuot Bitoy, right? Why? Meaning if I go to you and say, did you eat chicken yesterday? And you say, I swear I didn't eat chicken yesterday. And it turns out you did, you're chayiv for lying. So why isn't Shvuah the same chiyuv as everything else? Now, according to Shmuel, now we understand why. Because since you can't say about someone else's Shvuah in the future, you can't be chayiv in the past. And therefore the Torah had to come and introduce a new concept of Shevuot Edut. Let's read that inside. Because L'Shmuel Damar according to Shmuel says that something that you can't say in the future, you can't be chayiv in the past. Now I know why there's a specific requirement for Shevuot Edut in addition to the Shevuot Bitoy, because it's not a regular lie. It's a lie that you couldn't be chayiv for in the future. So you can't be chayiv. You usually can't be chayiv in the past. Here you have to introduce a special chiyuv. The Rav, according to Rav, right, any lie, even in the past, is the same as the future. So the Mai Hilchata Afka Rachmana, why did the Torah say a special case of Shevuot Edut? Amru Rabbanan Kamei Abaya. Well, the Rabbanan said in front of Abaya, well, it's Chiyuva Let Tarti. It's straightforward. It's because we want a person who lies about testimony to be chayiv twice, once for lying and once for testimony. So double jeopardy. Amar Lahu says, they said back to him, these were the Rabbanan, meaning the students in the yeshiva, said in front of Abaya, maybe that's why. And Abaya said, that's not possible. Amru Le, so he said, Amar Lahu, he said to them, Abaya said to the students, or the Chachamim, Tarti lo matzitu amrita, you can't be chayiv twice. The Tanya, because there's a bright that very explicitly says, La'achat me'ela. Torah says, anyone who does one of these things, La'achat ata mechayiv v'yata mechayiv shtayim, you never chayiv twice. Okay? So that's more, okay, thank you, Abaya. So what's the answer? Ule Abaya, l'may hilchata afka rachmana. So according to Abaya, who says you can't be chayiv twice, why does the Torah specify, according to Rav, Shevuot Edut, if you could be chayiv for Shevuot Bitoy? Says Abaya Lekiditanya. It's because of the following Breita. The Breita points out, Bikulan, we are 7 lines from the bottom at the star, by all of the prohibitions of Karban Olevi Yored, like Shevuot Bitoy and Tumat Mikdashu Kedoshav, and things we've already discussed. By all of the psukim, all the requirements, it says, Nemar V'ne'elam. It says if a person did something or knew something and forgot it, right? But by Shvuat Edut, lo ne'amar v'ne'elam. It doesn't say if you knew testimony and you forgot that you knew testimony. And that teaches us, says the Braita, l'chayev al hamezid kishogeg, that a person who does a lies on purpose about testimony is also chayev a karban olav yored, like someone did a b'shogeg. Shocking example of chayev a karban from mezid. So that is what Abaya answered. Amrulay Rabbanan Abaye. No, the Rabbanan didn't want to give up their answer, so they said to Abaya, "Ema b'mezid mechayev chada b'shogeg mechayev tarti." Maybe what the Torah is saying is that if you do it on purpose, you're chayev once. If you do it on shogeg, you're chayev twice. Once for shuat bitui and once for shuat edut. Amar Lu, so Abaye said back to them, "Stop giving me this 2 times thing. Hainu da Amri, we already told you. Didn't you listen yesterday? I said the pasuk of la'achat mi'ela la'achat ata mechayvo ve'ata mechayvo shtayim. Even Mazin, Nika Tarti, right? Says so, and if you did it twice, if you did Amazin, you wouldn't be chayav, you couldn't be chayav twice. Now, Rava says, I have a whole other answer. Says Rava, you know why it said Shvuat Edut in addition to Shvuat Bitoy? Mishum dahavi davar shebichlal. Because think about it. Shvuat ha-edut was included, it's a lie, right? Someone says to you, do you know testimony? You say, I don't know it, and it turns out you're lying. That was included in the general principle of keep the words you say. It was the Haya Bichlal, the Yatza Lidom Davar HaChadash. And it was brought out to tell you something new, meaning there's a special prohibition of Shvuat Edut. Ein lecha bo ela chidusho bilvad. Therefore, you only learn what is said, meaning it gets removed from its previous status and becomes only a new thing. And therefore, you can't be chayiv twice. You can only be chayiv once because it's no longer a shvuat bitoy, it's only shvuat edut. Says the Gemara now, the final thing today, we'll do till the 2 dots. Michlal, what it implies from what we've said so far today, is the Abaya Savar Ita L'Shvua Ba'olam. That unlike Rava, I have the right name, Rava, who said, look, there was a concept of shvuat bitoy. The Torah came and introduced a shvua of edut. Once you introduce a shvuat edut, you're no longer shvuat bitoy, right? You took it out of its old category and put it in a new category. That's what Rava said. So you're only chayiv once for your new category. Abaya said that's not true. You're in the old category of shvuat bitoy. You added shvuat to edut. You now have 2 prohibitions. Why don't you get makot twice? Because the Torah says do 1, not 2. But in theory, you're chayiv both. Now, why does that matter? Let's say, according to the Gemara now, let's say you lie about knowing edus, but you're not actually a good aid. You're related to the person, right? And we don't know that. So we say, do you know testimony? You say, I swear I don't know testimony. Turns out you knew testimony, but you're related. So you can't be chayiv shvuat edut because you couldn't have said the testimony anyways. According to Rava, once you testify about edut, there's no other shvuah. But according to Abaya, there's 2 shvuot. And therefore, why aren't you chayiv a second time? So ask the Gemara today, Michlal da Abaya Savar, Abaya seems to hold Ita l'shvua ba'olam, that the original shvuat bitoy exists. You just can't be chayiv twice, right? Amar Abaya, but didn't Abaya say, Moder Rab, that Rab admits, do you say to somebody else, Shvua shani yodeh lecha idut, right? I swear that I know testimony for you. Shani yodeh lecha, I know testimony for you. V'shtakach lo yadad the patur. You're patur, right? Why? Right? Because you can never have a past tense. Why can you never have a past tense? Let's say you said to someone, I don't know testimony for you, and it turns out you're related to them. So then you should be chayiv shvuat bitoy for that testimony. So if you can do it in the past in an unusual circumstance, why can't you do it in the future also? Answers the Gemara, you're right. Hadar be Abaya me'ahi, Abaya actually changed his mind. That Abaya initially felt that opinion, that you're not chayiv in the future because you can't be chayiv in the past. And then he realized, you could be chayiv in the past in this unusual circumstance where you're related to the person. Or else, Ibai Dema, our second favorite answer, on top of Daf Chavav, Chadaminah Rav Papa Amra. Remember, when Abaya died, or when Abaya went out of business, Rav Papa became the next head, and they had a lot of confusion about what some of the rulings of Abaya were often confused with rulings of Rav Papa, right? Because Rav Papa became the new lead, and people forgot, was it Rabaya, was it Rav Papa? And so sometimes when we have contradictions in Abaya, we say one of them, we don't know which one, was actually quoted in the name of Rav Papa, and it was mistakenly attributed to Abaya, and therefore it's no contradiction. Now that's a weak answer, right? But sometimes we come onto that answer. So we will stop here at the two dots. And God willing, I don't know if it's continuing tomorrow, but some will continue tomorrow. Just, I'll put this in the chat, of course. But this coming week, just to give the schedule, Motzei Shabbat, I'm going to be in Chicago. So we're going to learn after Shabbat, but it'll be like probably an hour after Shabbat in Riverdale because I'm on Central Time. Sunday morning, God willing, we'll do it regular time from Chicago, which will be 6:45. And then on Shavuot, I'm around, and we'd love to learn in person. Maybe around an hour before Mincha on Monday and Tuesday. So we'll put it in the chat, but that's the plan.
That sounds great.
Hope to see everyone. Shavuot Tov.
Yashikok. I was wondering we were going to get to testimony in this.
Yeah, no, I know it's finally getting there.
Because that's the most obvious case for Shavuot.
We're going to get to Shavuot Eidut, but we're like sort of building up to it. We introduced almost all the concepts already, but we out of order, essentially.
Miriam, is everything okay? Didn't you have a class today?
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Oh, that's right. I feel like it's Sunday.
Let's not push it here.
Okay,
Actually, I found out I have another class later.
Happy Yom Yerushalayim.
All right.
Yeah, happy Yom Yerushalayim.
All right. Chag Sameach.